Good afternoon. I hope everybody is having a fantastic Thursday so far. Looking through our list, I know that there are many of you that I know, and there are some of you that I have not had the pleasure to meet yet. If we don't know each other yet, my name is Jenifer Bean, and my job title here at the system office is that I am the director of assessment and the high school equivalency office. So today I'm going to have my director of assessment hat on as we discuss the 2026 to 2027 assessment manual. Every year we facilitate this webinar because we update our state's assessment manual every year, sometimes based on changes in policy, sometimes based on updates to assessments that are approved by our federal and state bodies here. We will get more into that as we get into the webinar. So again, just very, very grateful that you all are joining us today to discuss the assessment manual. All right. Before we get into our content, just a quick plug. Coming up in October, we are having our biennial system conference. This is our big conference that the North Carolina Community College system has every 2 years to just bring together all sorts of stakeholders, all sorts of folks who are involved in the work that we do here at the community college system. This year's theme is an essential investment centering students in the future of work. That conference will take place October 14th through 16th at the Raleigh Convention Center. Looking forward to seeing you all there. If you are able to join us, would be very happy to have you. I have the privilege of doing a session from my other hat in the high school equivalency office. So definitely, and a lot of other great presentations will be visible there. So we encourage folks, if you would like to and are able to, join us for the system conference that will be coming up in October. All right, let's get to the meat of the presentation. So why are we talking about the assessment manual today? We have 4 objectives for today's session. First of all, just to review the fundamentals of effective assessment and OCTAE compliance. If you are newer to our world of adult education, you might not know what OCTAE means. I will make sure to explain that to you guys as we move into our webinar. We will provide an overview of the assessment manual as a whole, just kind of how is it structured, what can we find there. We will discuss any significant changes to the assessment manual from previous editions, so anything that has been updated or changed since then, and then just to preview assessment office support activities for the 2026 to 2027 program year. So those are the main beats that we're going to plan to hit today. And then after we talk about the assessment manual, there is another manual that we will be talking about a little bit later on. Leigh, do you want to do just a brief plug for that before we get going?
The plug is I will be talking about the distance learning manual after Jen is done talking about the assessment manual. So yeah, stick around. It'll be very brief, and I actually have some interesting information that you guys are all VIPs. You'll be receiving it today before anyone else. So stick around for that. Yeah, back to you, Jen.
Thank you, Leigh. Perfect. So we are doing 2 for the price of 1 on manuals today. All right. So in the notes here, or in the slides here, we are providing a link to the 2026-2027 assessment manual that is available on the system, on the North Carolina Community College System website. We invite you, if you would like to go to that link now and pull it up, you are welcome to follow along. Leigh has also put a copy of the manual in the chat. So if you would like one way or another to participate in following along with the manual as we talk about it, we invite you so to do. All right. Let's start with the fundamentals. So the purpose of assessment and compliance with OCTAE. In a moment, I am going to take these slides down. I'm going to put up a website called Mentimeter. Those of you who've been to my webinars before are probably familiar with Mentimeter, so that's fine. We're just going to do a quick poll on Mentimeter in just a minute here. I would like to ask you to write a quick phrase to answer this question. Why do we assess our students? Why do we assess our students? I'm going to give you guys a chance to think about that. And then we will, while you're thinking about it, we will go ahead and pull up the Mentimeter slides so that you can do so. So for those of you who might not have used Mentimeter before, you can use a device, either a mobile device or you can do it from your computer, whichever one is better for you. Go to menti.com, M-E-N-T-I, menti.com, and there is an 8-digit code here that will take you to our participation for the day. So let me give everybody just a minute. I'm going to leave up the menti.com and the 8-digit code. Okay. Um, and actually, I will go move forward, but when I move forward a slide, that code should still be at the top if you haven't had a chance to get there yet. When in your Menti screen, I would like to invite you to just tell me, why do we assess our students? It can be a quick answer, it can be a little longer answer, whatever you think is appropriate. To determine growth, I see is already coming up. And we actually have a start voting piece here. So I believe that means that if you agree with an answer, you can kind of say, yes, I agree with that. But please do feel free to put these into the, oh, I see one very interesting answer here. I'm going to give you guys just about another little bit here to put your answers in, and then we'll take a look at what everybody has. Okay. I think we've got some themes coming up here as I'm looking, but let me give you guys just a moment to finish getting that getting that in there. I see there was a question about a link to this. If you have not had a chance yet, menti.com, which is at the top of the screen. If you go to that website, menti.com, and use that 8-digit code, that will take you to the screen that we're working on right now. All right. Great. Thank you for my person who put it in the chat as well. Thank you. All right. Let me give it just about another few seconds here because it looks like activity is slowing down. Okay. Seeing a couple more folks logging into Mentimeter. All right. I'm going to start kind of giving some of the general themes of responses here. I see 53 responses. Thank you all for getting in there and participating. I'm not going to read all 54 now, but I will kind of give some of the general ideas that I'm seeing here. I'm seeing to determine growth, to check progress and gains, class placement. I'm seeing the word baseline here a couple times. Determine a baseline and then monitor progress. To guide or inform instruction, definitely seeing that here. I like this phrase, to ensure we are meeting students where they are. So we have to know where they are in order to meet them where they are. So absolutely. I do appreciate the answer here that says our students would say it's to annoy them. We know that sometimes our students are kind of in the moment. That might be what they're thinking, but that might be what they think in that moment. To measure progress, data-informed instruction, MSGs, and we'll talk about MSGs and measurable skill gains as we move through here. Student progression and mastery of skills, okay, to accurately gauge what skills they know, what skills they need, and how we can best get them to their goals. That's a great summary of the whole kind of process of what assessment is. That's great. I see some really good ones. I'm going to just kind of pick out some of these, some of these that are really, really well said. Accountability measure. We certainly want to hold our students accountable for their learning, and we want to hold ourselves accountable to make sure that we're teaching them what they need to learn. Establishing initial education functioning levels, EFL. I love that I'm seeing some good adult ed language in here. So that's great. So we'll talk about some of these phrases a little bit further. To determine where students are starting and guide where they need to go from there. Guiding, I like that thought of guidance. Guide curriculum and instruction, so we know that so that we'll know what we need to teach. Great. Uh, to collect data on student growth and learning, and because the powers that be love an assessment, yeah, that's understandable. I understand that. Track and evaluate process, what we may need to work more on as instructors based on the student's level and progress, because we're not just assessing what they know, we're assessing what we've taught. So that is a great perspective to use from this. Um, we'll wrap it up here with to know what a student's skills and knowledge are at the current time. So we know that at least part of the idea of assessment is to take a snapshot of a moment in time and see where our students' skills are. Oh, and we had a new answer come in, give a baseline for comparison and allows us to see what we need to focus on. Fantastic. These are great responses. Thank you guys for contributing those to our session here. All right, I'm going to go straight back to our slides, and we'll get a little bit more into reasons for assessment, purposes of assessment, and about and we'll focus a little bit more on that compliance piece as well. So you guys gave a lot of really good responses, and most of them fit into one of these three categories. As educators, the reason that we assess is to decide placement, to communicate progress, and to determine next steps. Again, a lot of you all mentioned this in your responses to the initial poll. So those are kind of the three big reasons why, as educators, we assess students. So those are all very valuable for our classroom practice and just making sure that we are on the right track. We're teaching what we need to teach. We're not spending too much time on things our students already know, and we are spending a little bit more time on skills that they might not have yet. And then, of course, as some of you referred to in our Mentimeter, another purpose for assessment is to remain in compliance with OCTAE. But what is OCTAE? Again, some of you guys who've been around for a while most likely know. If you're a little newer, you might not know. So I do want to give an introduction to those of you who might not be familiar with OCTAE. So OCTAE stands for the Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education. This is the office at the federal level that is responsible for administering the EFLA grant, the Adult Education and Family Literacy Grant, which is what each of you receives in order to fund your adult literacy activities. They do this work for all of the adult education, the WIOA Title II funded adult education across the country. When we have something that is that requires compliance with OCTAE, we want to make sure that we're taking those steps to keep that compliance. So in order to receive EFLA funds, adult education providers must maintain compliance with OCTAE policies, as we mentioned. And one of those policies is having an OCTAE-approved state assessment policy each program year. Again, as most of you are aware, program year runs from July 1st of one year to June 30th of the next year. So every assessment manual that we release guides instruction within that time period. In this case, July 1st, 2026 through June 30th, 2027. And then, of course, our state assessment policy must align with federal policies that are outlined in various publications from OCTAE, including the NRS Technical Assistance Guide and published memos and any other documents, including, and you'll see this in the assessment manual, including the Federal Register. Federal Register is an announcement that comes out from OCTAE whenever there is a change to the approved assessments that we can use for our states. So if a new assessment is approved, if an assessment's approval is extended, if an assessment has a new sunset date, those will all come through the Federal Register. So if you all saw some of those things from me last year when some new assessment forms were approved and when some assessment approvals were extended, that's what those Federal Register emails are referring to. So again, going back to policy, the assessment manual articulates North Carolina's state assessment policy. We do not have identical assessment policies to every state. Each state has its own assessment policy. There might be little nuances here and there. They're different, but we do all have to use the Octave's policies and the NRS Technical Assistance Guide as a baseline. So North Carolina's policy is articulated in the assessment manual. So what's in the manual? We are going to take a look at that in just a moment here. We'll go section by section. So again, the assessment manual was approved by Octave for use in that July 1st, 2026 through June 30th, 2027 program year time period. It ensures that our entire state has a uniform policy for assessing adult learners in Title II funded programs. So if we think about making sure that our students have access to equitable programs, it wouldn't be very, we wouldn't be able to be measuring the same things if, for example, Coastal Carolina Community College had a different policy from Durham Tech Community College, which had a different policy from Mayland Community College. We want to make sure that everybody across the state has a uniform policy so that when we have our state data, it's mostly measuring the same things. And then our assessment manual is divided into 6 sections, and we will go section by section. Instead of kind of doing an overview of the sections or the subsections within each section, want to talk about it in terms of what questions can be answered by each section. Of course, something like an assessment manual we go to as a reference. We go to it when we have questions. So here are some questions that you can find answered in each section of the manual. So section 1 is titled Overview of the North Carolina Assessment Policy. So some questions you can get answered in that section are, what is the purpose of this document? Why do we have it? We've talked about it here, of course, but if you never need to go back and see kind of the formal language version of what we've discussed, that's all in the manual. What federal legislation is involved with this publication? So again, we've talked about Octave and a lot of the things that Octave requires of our states to do. So that and then WIOA, which is the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, Title II. We go into those things in that first section of the manual. And which assessments are currently approved for use in North Carolina by Octave and the North Carolina Community College Assessment Office. We have a quick overview of what is approved for use in our state. We do restate it later in an appendix at the end of the manual, and we'll talk with a little bit when we talk about the changes to the manual since last year, but there is an overview of the approved assessments in that first section. Section 2 is called Setting the State Context. So, I apologize, y'all. I accidentally went a little too hard on that forward button. All right, so setting the state context. So this takes that big picture that we had, the big overview we had in the first section, and we're going to narrow it down to North Carolina. These are some of our state-specific policies that we have in this section. This is one of our longer sections because we kind of go over the ins and outs of a lot of the federal performance language and some of those other things. So some questions that you can find answers to in section 2 include why and how are adult learners assessed in North Carolina? Of course, we started by talking about why we assess learners in general. We go into that in a little bit in section 2 of the manual. What are the policies for administering pre and post tests? We spend a lot of time on that question in section 2 of the manual and how that looks in North Carolina. How are the data from assessments collected and reported? Whenever we update the manual, we make sure to check in with our friends on the performance and accountability team and make sure that all of those protocols kind of align with what we're saying in the manual. So we do have some of those collecting and reporting data pieces in the manual. Obviously not, we don't have a full, for example, Advances user manual in there, but we do go over some of the basics. What are POPs and MSGs? Again, for those of you who might be newer, a POP is a period of participation. MSG is a measurable skill gain. Those are both kind of complicated things to discuss in a short amount of time, such as a webinar. But there is a lot more information on what a period of participation is and what a measurable skill gain is in section 2 of the manual. And I'd encourage you to look in there if you are new to assessment or new to adult ed in North Carolina to get more information about those terms. What is North Carolina's look back policy? I get a lot of questions about the look back policy, and just I'll mention this kind of the brief version of that. The look back policy is basically a policy that says that if you go to start from the beginning of a program year on July 1st, any assessments that were given within the past 270 days pull forward to the new program year to serve as placement for the student or as a pre-test for the student. Again, a lot more information about that is in section 2 of the manual. So I really encourage you to look at that if you're new to that term. What is an alternate placement? This is a policy that was enacted about 2 years ago. We were permitted by Octave to enact something called an alternate placement policy. Alternate placement means basically what are some ways that we can place students and serve them outside of the traditional pre and post testing that we normally engage with students. So again, there's a lot more information about the alternate placement policy in section 2. We definitely encourage you to read through that if you have any questions about that. And of course, for any of these, if you have further questions after reading the manual, I am happy to take any of those questions as you need to have them answered. All right. Number 3, part 3 of the manual is general assessment requirements. So this, we're going to widen the view a little bit more here. We're going to talk generally about the assessments themselves. So who can give and take assessments in North Carolina? So who is eligible to administer those assessments? And excuse me, who would we expect to see taking those assessments? How is an appraisal or locator used? Most of the majority of our assessment takes place with TABE or CASAS. TABE and CASAS have those appraisals and locators to help us to get an initial placement for the student. We don't use the results of the appraisal or locator as the initial placement, but we use it to figure out where we should be pre-testing those students so that we can give them a placement. How much instructional time should students have between the pre-test and the post-test? That varies by publisher. So we have all of that information in section 3 of the manual. What training is required in order to administer an assessment? We have a ton of links in section 3 to the training for each of our publishers and what is required and recommended for training for each of their assessments. And then finally, how are accommodations provided for students with documented disabilities? Many of us, I would dare say most, if not all of us, are serving individuals with disabilities. So we do have our disabilities guidance in section 3 of the manual as well. So that's what you can expect to find in section 3. Section 4, thank you. Guidelines for each assessment. So this is again zeroing in on each of our approved assessments for the state of North Carolina and what the publishers say about them. What are the recommendations provided by each publisher for student population? In other words, which student type is this assessment meant to serve? Training requirements. What are, again, we kind of reiterate there, what is required for in terms of training for students? Minimum and required post-testing hours. So each of our publishers says there is a minimum amount of hours that a student should be receiving instruction before they post-test. Those minimums, we hold to that in the state manual. For example, if a publisher says the minimum amount of hours a student should have before a post-test is 40, we maintain that in the manual because we understand that the publishers have done research and we understand that that's where we start seeing effective gains for students for the most part. In addition, or I apologize, minimum and required post-test hours. So we also, in addition, have requirements and recommendations from our publishers about what amount of time students should have between a pretest and a post-test. And then finally, purchasing new materials. If you need to purchase more paper-based testing equipment, if you need to purchase new seats for a computer-based assessment, that information is all there in section 4 of the assessment. And then we kind of cap it off with what are some general best practices for administering a standardized assessment. Regardless of whether you are a veteran in adult ed or you're just getting started in adult ed, we recommend reviewing these items. This is just general, not connected to a specific publisher. What should you keep in mind when you are administering a standardized assessment, such as TABE or CASAS or our other approved assessments? If you are like completely new to education, if you have never administered a standardized assessment before, or even if you're not familiar with the process for standardized assessments, this is probably a good place to start reading in the manual, because this just gives an overview of what you should be aware of if you are administering a standardized assessment to your students. And then next section is section 5, NRS levels and score ranges for assessments used in North Carolina. If you like numbers, section 5 is for you. This is where we list out all of the NRS levels and the raw scale scores that are attached to each NRS level for each of our approved assessments. So some questions that you can expect to see answered are, what are the NRS levels for adult basic and adult secondary education and for ESL? How can I translate the scale score from an assessment to the appropriate NRS level? And finally, what are the ESL graduate criteria for each ESL assessment? When we are administering ESL assessments, we can continue to assess students past what's called NRS level 6. If you have students who are in adult basic or adult secondary education, level 6 is where the students top out. You cannot go any further. You cannot make a post-test gain in adult basic or adult secondary if the student has a level 6. However, for our ESL students, there is one level above ESL level 6 for your NRS levels, and that is ESL graduate. So if your student, if you have a student that reaches that ESL graduate level, that means that they've gotten as far as they can get in that ESL assessment, and it's time to transition them over to an adult basic education assessment. A lot more detail is included in the assessment manual about what our policy is for students who are taking those assessments. And then finally, section 6 is the assessment of distance learners section of the manual. Some things that we address in that section are what constitutes distance learning? How do we define distance learning in the state of North Carolina? That is one thing you can find in that section. What procedures must be followed when assessing adult learners who engage in distance learning? Even if your students are not physically there at the building, if they are engaged with distance learning, we are still required to assess them according to our state policy. So unless they have an alternate placement or something similar to that, it is still necessary to pre and post test those students. So we address that in section 6 of the manual. And then what are some best practices for administering test sessions with virtual proctoring? So both TABE and CASAS offer the option to do virtual remote proctoring with the student, which means that you can observe them testing if they have a webcam. That's required for both of them. If the student has a webcam, you can watch them as they test, even if you are not in the same room. So that is something that TABE and CASAS both have available. We do allow virtual online proctoring in the state of North Carolina for both of those publishers. So we have some effective practices for that in section 6 of the assessment manual. And then finally, we don't have a slide for this one because it's not technically a section, but we do, I'm going to just scooch back here for a second. We do have an appendix at the very end of the manual. Again, it's not an actual section, so we didn't include it in the slides, but I do want to just briefly mention the appendix at the end of the manual is what tells you the currently approved assessments series for the state of North Carolina. These are all the assessments that are currently federally approved and state approved. We tell you what forms of each assessment are available. We tell you whether it's for adult basic or adult secondary or for ESL, and what date those assessments are currently set to expire. The approval for those assessments is set to expire. We do generally need to update this at least once a year. And in a minute, when we talk about the changes to the manual, we will talk about what has changed in terms of assessment approvals and extensions, those sorts of things. But that appendix at the very end is the best place to just kind of confirm what is currently approved, what am I available to use for my students as a North Carolina adult education program. Before we get to our changes, I'm going to pause for just a second. Leigh, are there any questions coming in the chat so far about what we've done for the first two sections?
So far, I haven't seen anything.
Okay.
But feel free to type in the chat. You can also raise your virtual hand because we are in a room of 161 participants. So if you're raising your hand in your camera, we probably will not see it.
Yes. So yes, please do use the raise hand on your Zoom panel so that we can see it. Leigh can draw my attention to that. If I don't see it, she'll see it. Oh, Leigh, I do see a hand up from Claudia.
Hey everyone. So this is a question. It's kind of a peculiar situation that we have experienced. You know, sometimes our students move from program to program. And now that we have advances, we can see the record on how they were placed in the other program. So we have had recently a situation where we have a student that was placed with tape. And then is still a participant, but is switching, either switching programs or attending both. I'm not sure. So we don't use tape, but we use CASAs. How do you think is best way to approach this situation? I mean, I'm trying to hear some ideas to kind of copy what you do or others do across. Thank you.
Claudia, that's a great question. And that's actually one that has not come to my attention before. Thank you for asking that. So that's, I think as we're kind of moving through this week, we might be able to see what some other practices might be. But certainly we want to make sure that the student, I say the first thing is just to make sure that we're not over testing the student. I know TABE and CASAS have some similarities in terms of their minimum and recommended testing times. I'd say still observe those minimum, maximum recommending times. Of course, the unfortunate thing is that the student will not be able to. I'm not sure. I don't believe a student can make a gain from a TABE to a CASAS assessment. I'm going to look. Claudia, is it okay if I look into that a little bit more and just kind of see what I can find out about that?
Yeah, of course. That was kind of where we have a wall, can we do that or not?
Yeah. I mean, obviously you can administer a TABE and a CASAS. I'm going to look into whether you can make a gain.
Yeah, that's where our head went to, the gain. Can we make a gain changing the series of tests when the student was placed with a different, and based on what my memory serves, I don't believe so, but I'm just curious about how others manage this situation. Thank you.
That's a great question, Claudia. And I see Erin Sibelius has her hand up. Is it okay if I go ahead and call on you, Erin?
Just before Erin asked her question, I did want to mention that Courtney is jumping in on that conversation about the taking process, and she did say they cannot. So, I mean, I guess maybe looking to confirm, but yeah, just Courtney is chiming in.
Yes, thank you very much, Courtney. I appreciate you putting that in. And so Claudia, hopefully that does answer your question. It sounds like you will need to get a new placement for that student. I'd say obviously use their previous testing to guide maybe initial placement in classes and to get them started. But maybe once they reach, and again, we want to be careful not to over test them. After maybe we've gotten some initial data on them, maybe we do a CASAS pretest so that we can then get enough hours to post-test them on CASAS. So I think that might be a good way to approach that. But Courtney, I really appreciate you enlightening us on that. Thank you so much.
Sorry about interrupting you, Erin. If you want to ask your question now, you can.
Yeah, that's okay. No, I was just going to respond and kind of tell Claudia what we do because we share a lot of students with the community college here in Asheville. And so, if a student comes to you and they've been pre-tested on the tape, and they're still attending the other program where they took that pre-test, then, keep in touch and, likely they will be post-tested by that other program. But if they're not, then you will not be able to show any progress for them unless you pre-test and post-test them as well. So you want to pre-test them with the test that you use as soon as possible so that you can get the 40 hours or whatever you need so that you can post-test them.
Awesome. Erin, thank you for that guidance. And I know that you're in a unique situation being in a community-based organization and that you are able to share students with the community college that's close by to you. So you do have to deal with that. So thank you for giving us that perspective on it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Claudia, I hope that might be some useful information for you. I hope so. Thank you for asking that question. That's very appreciated. Let me take a look at our time. I just want to make sure that we can get to our content, and I want to make sure that Leigh can get to hers. I'm going to go ahead and keep moving through the content. If you have any other questions, I will make sure to come back and grab those.
And feel free to type them in the chat.
And we'll keep checking the chat as well. Please pop them in, and we'll keep on moving forward. So next thing I want to address is changes for 2026 and 27. This year, I think, because I'm about 4 years into my job at this point. Here is the Director of Assessment of the System Office. So I've done a few of these assessment manuals. I think this might be the fewest changes I've done to a new edition of the manual. So we actually don't have a super huge amount of stuff to address in the section, but I do want to draw attention to a couple things. The big thing that you'll probably notice when you look at the new version of the manual is accessibility updates. So this is not a content change. This is a formatting change. We are making the commitment here in our adult ed program from the state level to make sure that our documents and anything we put out is accessible and that it's meeting those sorts of standards to make sure that everyone can use them and everyone can access them. So this means that the assessment manual got a facelift, and probably it's been a long time coming because I know the assessment manual has looked very similar for a very long time. So in addition to being accessible, it also just looks much better. I did want to mention one accessibility update that we did have to do that affects the content of the manual. Because Appendix B was not an accessible document, we did have to remove it from the manual. Appendix B specifically was the alternate placement request form. So we've mentioned alternate placement here a couple times. And again, just quickly mentioning that an alternate placement is if you have a student in one of a few certain situations, we can put them on an alternate placement so that it's not necessary for them to pre and post test as one would typically do with a student. So we had that request form in the assessment manual originally, but because we want to make sure everything is accessible, we've moved that to the performance and accountability page on the System Office website. There is a link to the performance and accountability page here. So if you have these slides available to you later, you should be able to click on that and access it. And excuse me, if you do want to request alternate placement for a particular group of students you are serving, that's what you will use to make that request. It's no longer in the manual in Appendix B. We updated the language in our assessment manual in a couple places. The main two language updates is In some places where we originally mentioned a pretest, we replaced that language with initial placement. The reasoning for that is that there are some situations in which a student is entering a new period of participation, but that new POP might not require a new pretest. So that if a student is on an alternate placement, obviously they're not pretesting, so their initial placement is the alternate placement. We also have a provision in the manual where if a student exits a program but then they come back again within 6 months in the same program year, they do not have to take a new pretest. So their previous testing can be used as their placement for their new period of participation. So because there are those situations where students may not pretest when they start a new POP, we in some cases have used the term initial placement to refer to a student starting a new period of participation and what their placement will be for that. We also changed the use of the term ESL exit. Up until this past year, we used the term ESL exit to refer to those students who we kind of alluded to previously, who are in ESL and they've gotten beyond the ESL level 6 level. They're pretty much, they've topped out at where they can be served in ESL. So because Advances uses the term ESL graduate, we just made that replacement in the manual. So we just use the term ESL graduate instead of ESL exit. That way it mirrors what you all see when you use Advances. And then finally, of course, the other change is assessment approvals and expirations. We had two, and hopefully you guys heard me talk about this because I talked about this a lot at the end of last program year. But just to make sure that everybody is aware, we had two assessment series expire at the end of the 2025-26 program year. Those were CASAS reading goals and Table 11-12. Both of those series expired on June 30th, 2026. So please make sure that you are not using either of those assessment series for students any longer. I did have one eagle-eyed person who emailed me ahead of this webinar and noted that there was a misprint, that we had actually referenced CASAS reading goals and Table 11-12 a couple places in the body of the manual. I appreciate that error being pointed out. So we actually went ahead and Leigh, I'm super appreciative to Leigh. She actually updated the website earlier today with the corrected version that no longer references CASAS reading goals or Table 11-12. So again, thank you to those of you who pointed that out to me. That should not be in the current version of the manual. Those are fully expired. You cannot use them anymore. We did have two updates on assessment approvals that have been reflected in the new manual. One is for ACT work keys. We've not talked about work keys a whole lot. That's because this is a relatively newer NRS-approved assessment for our adult ed programs. We approved it in North Carolina about a year or two ago because we want to give another option for those of you who might be serving students who are doing IETs, workplace literacy, and some of that other career pathway instruction. ACT work keys had some new paper-based forms that were approved at the end of toward the end of last program year. So the specific new paper-based forms are listed in the appendix of the assessment manual. So please, if you have any thoughts about using ACT work keys, please take a look at those new forms and just be aware that there is now a paper-based option for using ACT work keys. In addition to that, the NRS approval for ACT work keys has now been extended to expire on May 14th, 2033. So if anybody is, I don't think we have a lot of work keys use just yet here in our adult ed world. If you are interested at all in using that, please let me know, because again, that approval was extended to 2033, and there are now paper-based forms in addition to the computer-based forms that were already approved for work keys. And again, this was approved as an option for those of you who might see this as a good, as useful for your students in IETs, workplace literacy, and other career pathway classes. The other big approval update that we received from Octay was that TABE Class E, which is one of our ESL assessment series, had its approval extended for an additional year past what it was originally. TABE Class E was originally set to expire sometime in 2027. That expiration date, or that approval, I mean, has now been extended to expire on June 30th, 2028. So if you're using TABE Class E for your ESL learners, that is when you can expect to, at least for now, to continue using TABE Class E until. And of course, we're going to keep everybody updated as we hear more about any other approval updates from our publishers and from Octay through the Federal Register. All right, Leigh, I'm going to stop here. I did see a little activity in the chat. Let me stop and take some questions just to make sure that we can get everybody's questions here.
Looks like Erica is one of the first questions. I can either read it aloud, or if you've got access to the chat, you can also.
I do have access to the chat, Leigh. So just to kind of summarize Erica's question, alternate assessment form says for type 4, must include proposed alternate placement assessment with this form. So proposed alternate placement that should accompany the form. So Erica, that's a great question. And I'll just let you know now, I'm actually not the person who approves alternate assessment, so I do not receive those documents. Those are received by Jessica Rieger-Dunnigan and our performance and accountability director. My understanding is that she is looking for proposed alternate placement. What is the IET or career pathway class that you are seeking to use your alternate placement for, and how are you going to get a measurable skill gain from that student? Are you going to earn, and for most of our career pathway classes, that's going to be MSG3, MSG4, or MSG5. Basically, we need to know if you are if you're using alternate placement, how is your student going to get a measurable skill gain in the absence of post-testing? That's essentially what we need to know if you're going to submit an alternate placement. I hope that, oh yeah, and Courtney, thank you, Courtney, for putting that in there. Usually this language is already written within your IET, so it's just linking the two together. Perfect. Thank you, Courtney. That's great.
So succinct. She was just down to the point.
I know.
Michelle's also got a question about worksheets. I think that was the next one that I saw in the chat.
Great. Let me summarize Michelle's question. Just got the price list and none of the paper-based were marked as NRS-approved. Sorry. The pricing guide advises against buying those by the correct version. Michelle, if you don't mind reaching out to me after, that's because this is a very recent development. Having the paper-based approval, I think, happened like late May, early June, like right at the tail end of last program year. So that might be why at the time that you requested it, that was not, it was not an option. There were no paper-based work keys forms that were approved for NRS testing at that time. Again, very late last program year, Octay and the NRS did approve a group of paper-based forms. So Michelle, if you don't mind reaching out to me after the call, we're gonna I'll kind of work with you and ACT to see if we can get those paper-based. Okay, yes, Michelle, thank you, and just got it last week. Okay, thank you for letting me know. Again, I would double check the assessment manual. I did list the forms, the paper-based forms in the back that were very recently approved by Octay. So take a look at those, and that should give you an overview of what we received in the Federal Register as being approved. Okay, thank you so much. Patty Goodman asks, can you explain the information on the retroactive measurable skill gain on page 10? So let me see. Patty, I'll give you a quick overview of this. If I'm happy to talk with you offline from the call if you need a little bit more explanation than this. But essentially, a retroactive MSG occurs if a student is in your program, they stop out, and then they come back again later that program year. And again, for those of you who are new, stopping out means that a student stops attending for 90 days or longer. What happens at that point, if they are with you and then they stop attending for 90 days or longer, that means that they start a new period of participation. So if a student stops out and then comes back within the same program year, I have to make that very clear. This does not apply if a student comes back, leaves one year and comes back the next program year. If a student takes an assessment with you in that second period of participation and it represents a measurable skill gain from their entering EFL in the previous period of participation, the student can earn a measurable skill gain from that for that previous period of participation. So that is that's the quick version of it. And again, Patty, if you need to, like, maybe to look at some specific examples or something, please contact me and we can go over some specifics. Lisa is asking the corrected manual, and Leigh went ahead and sent that link. Leigh, thank you so much.
Of course.
And then Erica proposed alternate placement assessment refers in the form how the students will. Yes. So Erica, that is essentially what that is. Again, as Courtney mentioned, it kind of links to that language that's in your IET submission form. So it should be aligned with that. All right. Oh, great. Thank you, Courtney. Perfect. All right. So I love all of my folks who are Johnny on the spot here. That's fantastic. All right. I'm going to go ahead to the next section. If y'all, if you have questions, please keep them popping in the chat or raise your virtual hand. We're going to just keep on moving. I want to address one piece here. Actually, I want to address two last things here before I move it over to Leigh with the distance learning manual. I always like to do a Q&A in these assessment manual calls, just because I know folks have questions after they read. I had one question that was pre-submitted. I actually had another question that was submitted. Unfortunately, it was after I'd already sent the slides to Leigh, so I don't have it here on these slides. But I'm going to invite anybody else who might have had any other questions to do it after we go through the content of the webinar. Please feel free to put that question through. But I had one, and this actually was not a pre-submitted question for this year. The one question I did want to address is something that was asked in last year's assessment manual slides and in our presentation last year and the presentation the year before. Because it's been asked about the last 2 years, that tells me that this is on people's minds. So I want to make sure that I address this particular question today at the kind of proactively in this presentation. So the question that was asked, that's been asked the last couple of years, it's about accommodations. It's about students with documented disabilities. And the question was, if a student has read aloud accommodations, is it acceptable to read passages aloud from a reading comprehension assessment? We understand that students do have those assessments or those accommodations in place in order to make sure that they have equal access to the assessment as others. However, it does currently say in the assessment manual, and we are going to continue with this for the reasons that are going to be discussed in the next slide, that no passages from reading comprehension assessments cannot be read aloud to students. I wanted to make sure to state this very clearly, again, just because there have been questions about this the last 2 years that we've done this webinar. Here in the next slide, I'll go into some specific reasons for that. Number one, it is out of compliance with state policy for the manual. Page 20 does specifically say it's not appropriate to read an assessment of reading comprehension aloud to a student. It's also discouraged / out of compliance with publisher policies. So we absolutely want to encourage you to follow publisher policies and guidelines for those things. And then in addition, one thing I will mention is that I had a chance to meet with our Director of Disability Services here at the North Carolina Community College System. Her name is Dr. Trudy Hughes. And she confirmed in our conversation that because when you read aloud a reading assessment, that's no longer measuring a student's reading comprehension. At that point, you're measuring their listening comprehension. And she also stated that when we had a chance to meet and discuss this. If you have questions about anything to do with disabilities, for example, how accommodations look, anything along those lines, our subject matter expert here at the system office is Dr. Trudy Hughes, and I've provided her email address here. If anyone has any questions about disability services or how to serve those students well. Read aloud is absolutely appropriate for a math assessment. It's appropriate for a language assessment because a language assessment is not necessarily an assessment of reading comprehension. It's just those reading comprehension assessments that we are not, we're not reading aloud per the manual because it is no longer measuring a student's reading comprehension abilities at that point in time. So again, I just wanted to address this one proactively because it did come up the last 2 years that we had this particular webinar. All right. Again, I did not have any other pre-submitted questions, and I also want to make sure that Leigh has enough time to discuss. So actually, Leigh, I'm going to ask you a question. Would you like to discuss the distance learning manual, and then we can take questions all together at the end? How would you like to? Because I want to make sure that you have enough time to deliver your content as well.
I'm pretty flexible, but yeah, sure, we can definitely transition over the distance learning manual and then merge questions both for the distance learning manual and anything else that's burning for the assessment manual at the end of my section. So with that said, that means I think I need to
I'm going to stop sharing. All right. So we will be back to talk about the assessment manual after Leigh talks about the distance learning manual.
Correct. So let me see if I can do this. Okay. Can we see a screen that says distance learning manual updates? Awesome. Okay.
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, so with that said, it's my turn. So normally my fearless leader, Daniel Logus, who is the director of distance learning, would be leading this today, but unfortunately he is not here. So with that said, when we do get to the questions section, you can certainly ask questions related to the distance learning manual with a giant caveat that if it goes beyond my ever expanding knowledge about distance learning, distance ed, or if it requires a decision that the director of distance learning would have to make, I am going to have to respond with that frustrating answer of, let me, take that to Daniel Logus and I will get back to you. So I just wanted to mention that. So with that said, today I am going to be talking about the distance learning manual in its current 26 to 27 version and any updates that I want to highlight. If you are pining for a more in-depth a deeper dive of the distance learning manual, or you can't get enough of Jenifer Bean with her many hats. We actually conduct in the new director's orientation session 2. We go much more further in depth about the distance learning manual, about the assessment manual. Also, the provider's guide is included. So I would definitely encourage you to register for session 2 if you're not fully satisfied with my brief overview from today. Or like I said, if you want more from Jenifer Bean. So with that said, before I talk about the distance learning manual, why do we have a distance learning manual? Again, if you've attended our new director's orientation series, I guess I'm advertising it at a few points today. We do discuss the 13 considerations for the AFLA funding for sub-grantees. And one of those considerations, consideration 7, actually focuses on distance learning. And we must make sure that our programs provide distance learning software to support instruction of adult learners. And so the state team and our distance learning director, again, Daniel Logus in this instance, created a manual that standardizes and communicates the protocol for our distance education programs. And this is really to guarantee that whether your distance ed program is booklet based or it's online, that it's gone through rigorous verification to ensure that student time is counted accurately and correctly, and that the curriculum that the student is working through, it aligns with our North Carolina content standards. So, with that said, within the scope of our current limited resources, which means Daniel Logus and myself, the state office, it really just focuses on whether the clock time software is it accurate, does it provide accurate and correctly counted time for our distance eds programs. So unfortunately, right now we can't go too into depth about curriculum and it being aligned to North Carolina content standards. Our focus is mostly on accurate and correct time when we approve that clock time software. And if you can help me admit participants in, Jen, that would be great. I realize they're still filtering in. So you can find the distance learning manual on the federal programs providers hub. This is also the web page where you can find the assessment manual. And I will, at the end of my presentation, switch over to our system office federal programs sub pages, web pages, where everything has moved from NC Title II. If you were here at least the previous program year, we had a website that was devoted for all things CCR and it has been sunset. So everything's moved over to the system office. So like I mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, you are actually a group of VIPs that get this announcement, get to see the website updates today. How exciting for you. And you didn't even realize that. So with that said, again, the purpose of the manual, we're wanting to make sure that time is accurately counted, and that means that in terms of clock time software, that software needs to produce time-stamped student login, logout reports. And what I have here on this slide is taken directly from the manual. It is Walt Disney's magical fictional class that does show the type of report we're looking for approved clock time. And so really this is the key. So if you've got clock time software that you do not see on the approved list that you would like to get on the approved list, this is really the report. Of course, it's not going to be Walt Disney's class, but this is the report that your clock time software needs to create in order for it to be compliant according to North Carolina funding parameters. So again, this is very much just some highlights talking about what is there and what is no longer there in the distance learning manual. So I wanted to start first with booklet based, what is available and what is no longer available. So since the 24 to 25 program year, the alternative learning packets have, as Dan likes to call it, they've all gone extinct. So they are no longer approved as distance education curriculum, unfortunately. So that is no longer an option for you if you want to run that booklet-based distance ed program. What is approved? So what you can use, Aztec's 100-hour re-entry pre-release program. This is booklet-based for our corrections students. You can use that. You do need to contact Aztec to purchase these booklets for each student, and they are consumable. So you must purchase a set every time you want to use them for a student. So it's one booklet per student. You cannot reuse them for a different student. We also have approved the high school equivalency in the community booklet-based program. It's been around for a while. Again, we've moved from NC Title II back to the system office, so you can access those booklets, they're PDF files. You can access them on the Providers Hub page. Again, I'm going to show you that at the end of this presentation. If you are interested in running this program, all of the files are located there, all the lessons, but the answer keys are not, because you never know. There might be a student that runs across this page. So if you are interested in running the high school equivalency in the community program, then you do need to contact me to get those answer keys to access them. Moving right along. So for software-based and online programs, what's available and what is no longer available? Some of you have actually already contacted me regarding We Speak NYC. Unfortunately, it has been temporarily removed. We no longer reference it in the manual, and it no longer exists online in the sense that you cannot request access to the materials. This is because I think we're all aware we are moving, some of us have moved already to the Canvas LMS statewide learning management system. We are currently using Moodle. We're shifting over to Canvas. And so there is a lot that needs to be done with regards to We Speak being hosted and running through the state Canvas platform. Learning management systems do not play well with each other, we have found. And so while We Speak NYC was running fantastically on Moodle, we're already anticipating some hiccups with the Canvas transition, so we want to work through those before we then once again release We Speak NYC, but never fear. I am tenacious and stubborn as a goat, so we will get there eventually. And Lisa is asking, Lisa, I guess my question to you is, do you have access to We Speak through Wake Tech, or you're talking about We Speak from the state office program? Yeah, so Wake Tech is different. So Wake Tech was the original pilot that you guys ran We Speak NYC to approve it as a proxy our software. So yes, Wake Tech can continue to run it as it is, but for anyone else, they cannot until we have transitioned over to Canvas and approved it. But let me confirm that with Dan, but I'm pretty sure that you can still run it. Okay, clock time software that has been approved since 25 to 26. Ascend Math, Hawks Learning, Ellie, I gotta always remind myself how to pronounce that, and Study Buddy for Corrections have all been approved. They are now on the list of approved clock time software, and this is because, again, going back to that focus about accurate and correct time, these vendors can produce accurate and appropriate time-stamped reports, and so that's why they've been added to our approval list. So with that said, before I move over to our system office website and show you guys where you can access all of these materials and resources, any questions for me regarding the distance learning manual or what I've mentioned regarding the distance learning manual?
Leigh, the only question in the chat had been what Lisa asked. I think you
Okay.
addressed that.
I think I did.
But certainly, sorry to take Leigh's job here. If you would like
should
to
take my
click
job.
click the raise hand function on your panel if you have any other questions for Leigh in the distance learning manual.
I appreciate the support, Jen. Tell Daniel he's going to have to return from racing. Exactly. I know. He's been racing hard in Monaco. But yes, we will let him know. We do miss him so, but I hope it's okay, Ed, that I am running the ship as we'd say for now. So with that said, okay, yay, everyone clap. VIP group. Guess what? We have moved from NC Title II to the System Office website. And so where can you access all these materials? Are Burlington English reports approved? So Burlington English is still on the approved list. So I believe that's what you're asking, Selena, right? Is if Burlington English is still an approved clock time? Yes. So it's still on the list. It's not gone away. But good question. So yes, so we have moved back to the system. We've returned to the System Office website. So you can access both the Distance Learning Manual and the Assessment Manual on the Providers Hub. But how do you get to the Providers Hub? Let me show you. It's a little difficult to navigate. So if you go to the System Office website, click on College Faculty and Staff. If you scroll all the way down, not if you should, there's a Federal Program section. That's where we live. So under the Federal Program section, we are WIOA Title II. From WIOA Title II, keep on scrolling down. Don't worry, we will talk about this again during the statewide call that's happening soon. The Providers Hub, you can access from here. You might want to star it, bookmark it. And from there, you can find the assessment manual, you can find the distance learning manual, and additionally, some of the things I mentioned about distance learning and distance education, if you keep scrolling down. This is where you can find the list of all of our approved clock time software. Also, if you want to get software onto the approval list, this is the application. If you're looking for how to conduct a proxy hour study, which is actually what Wake Tech did to then eventually get We Speak NYC approved, this document provides all that information. And additionally, if you're looking for HSC in the community, I believe it's somewhere here. I might have scrolled past it. HSC in the community right here. I did scroll past it. And yes, this is where you can access all the lesson materials if you want to run this program. Again, please reach out to Leigh Davidson for those answer keys. That's me. And then one more thing before we go to the questions for Jen and assessment and distance learning, if you have any more. Another piece of information, VIPs. Because NC Title II has moved to the system office, some of you may have noticed currently our PD archives is not live. So our temporary fix is I have made our YouTube channel, some of the playlists in our YouTube channel, public and accessible. So previously conducted webinars that we have recordings and materials for, those are now, they can now be found on our YouTube channel in the playlist. The webinar that is being conducted today, and once we have processed recording, if you need to access that and the materials, you can find that within this channel. We have different playlists. So for example, today's webinar would go under the College and Career Readiness Manual Training playlist. So if you type, I think I can put this in the chat, if you type this into a YouTube search engine bar, you can find the YouTube channel, the actual links in the chat. Which links exactly, Claudia? If you're talking about links to the web pages, I did provide most of those earlier.
Where there are the manuals, the specific manuals.
Yeah, so if you go to the Providers Hub, which again, I did provide that in the chat, you can find the manuals in the Providers Hub. So right here is the assessment manual and then the distance learning manual you can find there. And I've also attached them in the chat, Claudia, so you can download them from the chat.
Thank you.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And thank you, Prudence,
right.
for providing access to
Well, I
YouTube.
gotta hurry up.
Yes, Melissa, do you have a question? Nope. Okay. So I think that's good. I'm going to stop sharing, but any more questions, comments, concerns? We've got time. We've actually got like 15 minutes.
Awesome. So since we have time, what other questions do you all have for us between the two manuals that we've discussed today? And again, please feel free to pop those in the chat or to click the raise hand function in the panel on Zoom.
Exactly.
I do want to mention, Leigh, Carrie Lynn mentioned that she appreciates the usability of the page and the tiles and buttons work very nicely. So I just wanted to make sure that you were aware.
We like immediate feedback. We take that.
And it looks like Prudencio Martinez is raising his hand.
Hi there. Thank you for having us here. This is great. Learning a lot. So I'm the director of multilingual programs and community outreach at Leonard Community College, and I work in conjunction with Associate Dean Karen Hill. She's been running the basic skills programs as well. And so I am working on the ESL program and also the GED in Spanish. And I would like to know if there is anything about GED in Spanish, because I know it was recently approved, 2-3 years ago, and for the first time in the state, and I don't have any resources. We're just working on the go. We have used Aztec. We use Aztec. We used, everything that GED provides, everything that HiSET provides to create, some guidance on how to do the instruction. And, it's been great. I have amazing instructors, amazing students, mainly online. And however, there's nothing. I would like to click on that dashboard and find something that says specifically GED in Spanish, but there's nothing. And if it's there, it's really buried, and I don't know where it is. But it is important to have guidance, from the system, because I know it's new in a traditionally taught in English program. However, around the nation, it's taught in multiple languages, and but there's nothing. And I would like some light in the tunnel to make sure that I provide to be on point on what I'm providing my community.
Sure. So Prudencio, thank you for mentioning that. So a couple things to kind of untangle from what we're doing here.
Yes.
GED is part of our high school equivalency, of
Mhm.
course. So that's I actually do a high school equivalency call every month at the end of the month. So if you want to be invited to those, please
Please.
email me, and after we talk, I'll put my email address in the chat so that I can send you so I can get you on the high school equivalency office email
That would be
list.
great, and
Um,
if I can bring my team, my instructors into the that meeting or something, that would be great.
for sure, for sure. So and I'm trying to think about how to talk about this in the context of assessment, which I know it's everything is testing, so it's a little bit, but there are nuances, kind of difference between what we do in the assessment manual and what we do for high school equivalency. One thing I will mention that is kind of in context of assessment is, as you mentioned, high school equivalency classes being taught in Spanish is something we've been permitted. I think 3 years ago was when we were first permitted so to do. I think that's when our policies first started to allow that. So, as you mentioned, this is a relatively recent piece. We That kind of falls a little bit more into the instructional piece as opposed to like the assessment, but we certainly that's certainly something we can look at where to point, at least point people maybe for resources. Again, to tie it back to assessment, one thing I will mention is that we mentioned the alternate placement policy earlier in this call. We do have a way for if an individual is with you specifically to take a high school equivalency exam and pre and post testing might not be the best fit for them. We do have an alternate placement method for individuals who are taking the high school equivalency exam in Spanish to place out of pre and post testing. That's something we can certainly, if you need more information about what that looks like, certainly happy to talk with you about that. And also happy to get you on the high school equivalency office email contact list. So maybe we can talk about that in more detail.
No, that's
Um,
great, and
yeah.
I know you
Mhm.
were focusing more on the assessment, but
Yes.
it is pertinent to that because sometimes just to make sure, okay, are we doing the right thing? Are we doing the
Sure.
right assessments?
Sure.
And again,
Mhm.
we have done wonders, but
Yes.
I just want to make sure, that I know that there's something out there. So thank you for your
Mhm.
input, thank you for your feedback, and I
For
look
sure.
forward to, learning more. And thank you for all those who have made some comments there. I appreciate that.
Yes, and we do have more than one, multiple providers who are providing high school equivalency instruction in Spanish, and I do see that many of them have mentioned in the chat that they have some good practices that they're happy to share. So
I'm gonna put my contact information here. If anyone needs to send me something, I will appreciate it.
awesome. And Courtney, I appreciate you being in the comments and getting some of those questions answered. Thank you so much for doing that. Um, so thank you. I do want to let me see. Ooh, we've got a lot of questions going in here. That's cool. All right. What I'll do is I'm going to summarize just a few of the questions. Some of the ones that Courtney has addressed, just so if anybody else had those questions, we can kind of talk about those a little bit. Maria Mendez Cacique asks, are other programs using alternate placement as their main assessment or exclusively for HSE? Want to see how it works specifically for GED Ready. Courtney mentioned for traditional students, we always recommend to use the pre and post testing so you're not limited on the type of MSGs a student can earn. So again, just kind of to echo what Courtney mentioned, yes, we have alternate placement. It's there and it is a tool for students for whom it might be appropriate, but it's really important that you strategically think about which students you're using alternate placement with. It might not be a good general practice, but if you have that student who is almost ready to take the GED exam and maybe they don't need 40 hours of instruction with you to pre and post test, that might be a student who benefits from this. Maybe you have a student who's in a career pathway class with you and taking the TABE pre and post test might not be the most appropriate thing for them. That student might be a good fit. So those are some populations that might be a good fit. I'm actually going back a little bit that I missed a couple questions, and Lori, I very much sorry I missed your question previously. Let me
Yeah, I was
grab it
gonna say, I
now.
think the first one
Um,
is the work keys question about is it
Yes,
effective? Yeah.
yes. So we're going back to that. Lori Green asks, I'm not familiar with work keys. Is it a better fit for testing with digital literacy students? Great question, Lori. So work keys is meant specifically for individuals who are learning English, reading and math skills in the context of workplace. So those questions are the questions and the items on work keys are very specifically geared toward workplace context. How do I do problem solving on the job? Those sorts of things. What I would love to do is I would just going to make a note here, Lori. I'm going to send you the page, like this page with some sample questions, excuse me, from work keys. And then that will hopefully maybe that'll give you a good idea of what that assessment looks like. We'll get that to you so you can see what those questions look like and you guys can make an informed decision about whether that might be a good fit for what you're doing at isothermal. All right, that's a good question. Steve Gunter, actually, this is going back to Leigh. This is going back to distance learning.
Yeah,
I'll let you take
I
that if you'd
cannot
like.
provide any insight into that other than I know we've approved it. I certainly am not, running a program, and I don't know anyone who's actually currently using Study Buddy in corrections that can provide you with that information, Steve. But that is a goal, a hope of mine at some point in time to actually have a database of all of our providers in which distance learning programs they are currently running, and then have access to that on the website. That is a goal of mine. I have been instructed to delay sending out surveys because I guess we do send out a lot of surveys from the state office. So there has been a request to hold that until a later date. But yes, that is a goal of mine, Steve. And then maybe we'll find out who's actually using Study Buddy, and you guys can match and have conversations. So hopefully I can get that to you sometime soon.
Awesome. And Steve, Mike Tildesley, our corrections director, might have some more information about that as well,
Yeah.
since he does work most closely of all of us on the team with that prison population. He might have some more information about what's on Study Buddy and what's available there. So that's a great question. Thank you for asking about that. All right, got some folks who are mentioning that they're doing the high school equivalency in Spanish, so that's fantastic. Wonder if maybe some community of practice in the future. I'm not sure.
Exactly.
Something to
It
think
kind of looks
about.
like it.
Melissa, yes, that's a good clarification. I will make that. Melissa asks, I thought specifically we could provide instruction in languages other than English, not specifically in Spanish. Melissa, that is correct. The policy is that it is okay to provide high school equivalency instruction in other languages. It doesn't specifically say Spanish, but Spanish obviously is another language. But yes, you're correct that the policy does say high school equivalency in languages other than English is all right to do. Just practically, the majority of that is occurring in Spanish, and Spanish is the only other language that GED and HiSET are offered in. I've been to multiple GED conferences and HiSET roadshows where we've said, can we consider some other languages? But that is still something that we are asking those publishers for. But Melissa, thank you. That is a good clarification. It is other languages than English that the policy says. Karen, alternate place was approved. It did not work. Well, so thank you for letting us know that it didn't work for your population, Karen. That's fine. This is a question for distance learning, Leigh. Matt Fuse is asking about the Aztec 100-hour booklet.
Okay, I got to scroll down then because I was also going backwards.
3:17 p.m.
Where are 317? Matt, where are you, Matt?
Would you like for me to read it out?
Yes, I
Okay,
can find Matt. I'm
I'll
lost.
read it out. I got you. Let me read it out. Hello, can I go back to the booklet-based Aztec 100-hour? I believe the system office said that students can only complete one packet per week. That's 19 weeks. Are these rules still in place?
Yes, they are still in place.
Okay, great. Thank you, Matt.
Yes,
Hopefully
thank you for that clarification question.
Awesome. All right. And then Prudencio provided his
Contact.
information. Claudia had asked about providing links, and I think you provided those links already.
I did.
Yeah.
And Claudia, I'm probably frustrating you because I'm not actually providing you with the PDF link. And let me just provide you with more context because also Michelle mentioned it. Eagle eyes, Michelle, I appreciate it. So the table of contents, some of you might have noticed in the distance learning manual is Wonkadoodle. And that's because Jen, right, she mentioned that the assessment manual went under the knife, got a facelift. The distance learning manual also is going under the knife, having a facelift for accessibility purposes. However, it is still in surgery. And so as much as this is, right, the current 26 to 27 distance learning manual, the surgery is not yet completed. And so we are going to then we're going to upload the accessible version of the manual, hopefully within the next couple of weeks. And so that link that I could provide you with, Claudia, would be completely inaccurate because it'll be a new PDF file that's attached to the provider's hub. That's why I keep focusing on that web page, not the link to that PDF file. And so, yes, the table contents will be improved. It will not be Wonkadoodle, and it will look really nice and fancy like the assessment manual currently appears. So, context, it's important.
Awesome. Thank you. That sounds good, Leigh. All right. All right. I see another Carrie Lynn Raymond also mentioned for South Piedmont. Prudencio, that's another person who's mentioning experiences with Spanish, with teaching, with assessment, or not assessment, I apologize, instruction in Spanish. So that's good. Erica Witzel is just mentioning, so we've got a few people mentioning their experiences with alternate placement. So it's mentioning that they don't find it helpful because it requires too close to call or likely to pass as documentation for the GED ready assessment, practice test. I will mention just because I see that we're close to time. So I'll just mention briefly what our reasoning was behind that. Our reasoning for setting a high bar on the practice tests for both GED Ready and the HiSET official practice test is because we're really kind of targeting those students who don't need a lot of time. We think that if a student is below that too close to call measure, they probably would benefit from having that 40 hours, the pre and post test for instruction. We're with alternate placement, we're really trying to target those students who don't need a lot of time. They're almost there. They just maybe need a little bit of time to review some things or study some things. And they just need a little bit of a boost up before they take the GED exam or the HiSET exam. So again, kind of going back to being strategic with the students that you use alternate placement for, that's kind of what we're kind of going for when we mention that. So it's not meant for your general population of students, most likely, unless you have a lot of students who are very placing high and they don't need a lot of time before they test. So that's just kind of letting you know what our thinking was when we set those benchmarks for alternate placement for individuals who are taking high school equivalency either in English or in Spanish, because we do have very similar things there. Steve Gunter looks like Dr. Gregory at College of the Albemarle is also using Study Buddy, so she might have some good practices.
Exactly.
Nikisha Robinson kind of has brought some good resources for USA Hello. That's awesome. Okay. And then let me see.
Later on, Study Buddy has also mentioned Veronica's asking Steve about the whitelist. I mean, I'm trying to think if I've got the link somewhere I can easily access. I mean, I know Mike would
Yeah.
be able to
And
provide that resource, but
what I will mention is the whitelist is specifically for INET, which is that internet connection in the prisons. If it's on the tablets are not on INET, so it might be that Study Buddy is available on the tablets, but not on INET if it's not on the whitelist. That would be my guess. I would absolutely recommend talking with Michael Tildesley for more information on that. Because he obviously is our subject matter expert.
Correct.
Erica Witzel mentions that we need approved assessment for HSE in Spanish using CASAS goals. Erica, unfortunately, we don't have that because the NRS, the federal level has not approved any Spanish language assessments. So because we don't have any federally approved Spanish language assessments, we can't approve one at the state level. That is something that is probably that is a blind spot, I'm guessing. But we unfortunately, if it's not federally approved, we can't approve it as a state. So that is the reason that we put forth alternate placement for those students taking high school equivalency in Spanish. But we unfortunately just don't have an assessment to approve at the state level for that. All right. Let's see.
We're getting more context about Study Buddy with being a Atari. I like that analogy of like a Atari game where it's cartridge. Yeah, Dr. Kimberly's correct. That's why I actually put up that image on the slide deck for distance learning, because I didn't really understand what it meant until I looked it up. So yeah, I thought it was like a clock time software, but no, yeah, so it was cartridge on that, like Atari. Lauren's got questions about We Speak, which I would love to answer those, but again, we're holding off on We Speak until we've transitioned it to Canvas. How Wake Tech is running it, we took that content and put it into our state office Adobe Captivate, which is an interactive, I guess you call it like an interactive video. And so the content's the same, but the way that students interact with that content is different than how Wake Tech is running it. And so we had a pilot program. We had a few providers. YMCA was one of them that some students were going through We Speak, but not enough to really provide insider information. But again, we will revise. We Speak will come alive again. Let's just first transition it to Canvas, and then we can continue that conversation, Lauren.
Awesome.
I know, a very frustrating response, but that's what I got.
Awesome. And it looks like folks are making connections in the chat, and that's fantastic to see.
Yes, that's what we want.
Leigh, it's a little bit past 3:30. I'm noticing for the time. I'm going to go ahead and put my email address in the chat so that if anyone has any questions about assessment or any of those things I mentioned for like high school equivalency or other stuff we might need to take offline, I went ahead and put my email address in the chat so that you can please feel free to email me. I will let you know that I do my best to email it back as quickly as possible, but unfortunately, when I have high volumes of emails, it might take me a little bit, but I promise I read every single email and I respond, even if it's not immediately. So please understand if it's not completely immediate response, but we will make sure to read it and get you a response.
Exactly. I've also provided my email in the chat if you've got any questions about distance learning. But again, some of them I'll probably just forward on to Daniel Logos, who is the director of distance learning. And going back to our YouTube channel, I would highly, highly recommend subscribing since the PD archives is currently not live. So you will be able to access the recording for this webinar and the materials. So that includes the slide decks that you all saw today. You'll be able to access that on the YouTube channel. It does take us between 1 to 2 weeks maximum to process the recording and get it live. So go check us out on the YouTube channel. Thank you so much for joining us and sticking around for 2 minutes. I hope that this energized you on a Thursday afternoon. You're ready to keep on working, and we'll see you soon somewhere else sometime. Take care.
We'll be here, everybody. Have a great rest of your Thursday. Bye-bye.
Bye.